I need more guidance and I need to make more money because I'm just so tired of this back and forth broke energy, like just barely making it, spending to zero. And I knew in my heart that I needed to learn more. I was like, okay, I'm going to stop just being in all the spiritual woo-woo manifestation stuffy stuffs. And I'm going to start to actually take care of my finances. I'm going to take care of money. I'm going to show money that I care. I'm going to give it a place to rest in my life. And I never, ever looked back. Hello, my love. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast here on YouTube. I am going to ask you to take just a moment before enjoying this episode and go and hit the subscribe button. It not only helps the show, but it helps the channel. And I only want to continue to bring you incredible content and beautiful video content here on the YouTube. So just take a moment before enjoying the episode and hit subscribe. Thank you. Hello, my gorgeous. Welcome to another episode of Natalia Benson, the podcast. It is wonderful to be with you again. Thank you so much for tuning into the show and joining me for another episode. I hope you have been loving all of the guest interviews that I've had for you, and you're just enjoying 2026 version of NB the podcast. And so this episode is going to be really cool because I'm basically going to take you through just my journey of, building this career, so to speak, and what it's been like for me, what it's been like for me financially, what it's been like for me with this business before I really hit a stride. And what I would say is really inspiring this is very simply, so I have my membership, Magical Women in Money, MWMM, and I've had that membership for about 7 years. And every week we do a Q&A. And something that came up quite a bit in the last couple of Q&As were my babes really asking questions around like, oh my gosh, like we feel like it's taking long, or like, how do I get out of the job that I don't like? And just like all of this different stuff of just really being in the process of like getting your finances together. I also have a lot of women in my community and women in my life who are in their early 20s and who are just building a business or just getting into, their earning capacity. And so I thought what could be really special about this episode is just really getting to share some of the high level experiences that I've had, or more in like a high level fashion of what it is that I've experienced over so many years, and also really showing and speaking about the things that I was doing and the things that I experienced before, anything really took off or anything really started to build momentum. Because I think, and I know this for myself, it can be so easy to like look at someone and be like, oh, like they, compare ourselves, where it's like we're comparing our chapter 1 to someone's chapter 25. And so I hope in what I'm going to share with you in this episode that it just helps you to really get out of comparison, to see like the gift of the journey and just different aspects of like what it takes, or at least what it's taken for me to build this iteration of my work and of my finances. So the first thing that I want to touch on is like kind of where I began with money. One of my first, I'd say, formative memories is when I was about 16 years old and I bounced my first check. I did not consider myself good with money at all. I remember my parents like trying to teach me how to balance a checkbook, and I did my best, but it always just felt very overwhelming, very, very confusing, and just frankly boring. Like it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I remember my 16th birthday, I had gotten some money and I spent too much because I had no idea what I was doing. And I started working as soon as I could when I was 14 years old. There was a cafe in my neighborhood. I grew up in a place called Ahwatukee. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it's a suburb of Phoenix. And I worked at this little restaurant there. And I remember seeing the hostess, and she was like a girl that I really really admired at school. And so I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so as soon as I could start working and like earning some money, I did. I'd get like $60 paychecks every 2 weeks. And yeah, I had my little hostess job and I just started earning money. So the interesting pattern for me was that I could figure out how to earn money, but I didn't know how to take care of money. Like I would figure out how to earn it and then I would spend it all. Like I didn't save. I didn't really have, of course, also being in high school, I just had no semblance of organization. Obviously I had some kind of checking account because I remember I'd go to Starbucks or Einstein's Bagels, or I was like obsessed with Chipotle. I've always liked eating out. So I spent like a lot of my money on that. But I remember there was a birthday where I overspent and I was at the bank and I just felt so much shame around spending too much money. And I just felt like, shoot, there's like something about this that's really important, but something that I'm not understanding. And I don't think I had the awareness to ask for help. I just kind of had this internal dialogue that I was supposed to get money. And by I say get, I mean, I was supposed to understand it. I was supposed to it was like this natural thing that everyone understood. And for whatever reason, I didn't get it. So fast forward into my 20s, because this is really the most formative time for me financially. I started my first business. I've talked about it in recent episodes. I started my first business when I was about 19 years old, and I had that business for about 7-8 years. And essentially, when I started that business, the reason I started that business is because I knew that I wanted to have something of my own. I knew that I wanted to earn my own money. I didn't necessarily know the medium that was going to take. And jewelry was just something, especially being a manifesting generator, I get inspired by my surroundings. So I remember I had seen someone who had a jewelry line. I liked what they were doing. And I just was like, okay, I'm going to do my own version of this. And my first creative thing that I ever did, because I didn't consider myself a creative person literally at all, was I was actually a stylist. I was in San Diego, so it's a totally different world than like being a stylist in Los Angeles, but it was awesome. And like I lived with a really well-known like events photographer and I styled his shoots, and I just was very good at like making friendships and connections. And before I knew it, I was like going to Las Vegas and like styling these shows for like this little mini fashion company that existed in San Diego. And I just always had like an ingenuity. And while I wasn't making all this money, that was sort of my first spark of just like having something of my own and then creating and generating opportunity and money through like my own ways of like doing things that wasn't coming from like a job. So when I was getting out of school, I remember my dad called me one day, and I had my jewelry line at that point for about, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. I'd had it for about 5 years. And I think I was about 23 or 24 when I graduated college, because I moved to Los Angeles on a whim. I basically had to start over with some credits. So I got out of college a little bit later, but I just ran my business. I was running my business. I was living off of it. I was making money. It's not like I was making tons of money, but I was making money. Like I was generating like a couple hundred to a couple $1,000s a month. At the holidays, I generated a lot of money. So I knew how to generate money. And my plan was to build it up so that when I got out of college, I didn't have to go and get a job. I just wanted to have something of my own. And I remember my dad calling me and literally being like, your mom and I want to know like when you're going to start to apply for jobs. And I just said, Dad, I have a job. I was like, I have a business and this is my job. And I remember my dad, bless him, from wherever he is in the universe, he's going to be like, oh, why do you have to tell this story? But he basically so he was a Scorpio, so he was very chill until he wasn't chill. And I remember like every so often my brother and I would get the booming voice of my dad when he was afraid or he was angry about something, especially if we were ever picking on my mom when we were younger. Oh my God, my dad would just, oh, he would defend her. It was, oh, my brother and I were like, oh, he was so intense. But, he was in his protector energy, and I totally understand it now. But basically, he called me, and like, I just opened up that freaking voice of doom, and he was screaming at me, and he was like, you're going to end up under a bridge. And he's just like, you're going to, like, I don't even remember what he said, but he was so afraid. It was like, it was so hurtful. And I was crying and weeping. And I was like, Dad, I would rather end up under a bridge than like do something I don't want to do. And I was just like, then I'll end up under a freaking bridge. So my parents, God bless, like they just, they were afraid. Like they were very corporate. They had, their own stability and success that they've created through working really hard and working for people. And that just wasn't my MO. Like I knew I wanted to work for myself. And I remember there would be times where I would get in fights with my parents when I was in college, and they would literally get so angry with me that I wasn't like going on the program that made them feel safe. And I'd have to like run out of the house and go sit outside and sit in nature. And I remember one moment, we were living in San Diego at the time, and I just remember being like, I just remember sitting on this rock, and I just was like, I don't know, and I didn't really have much semblance of spiritual connection then at all. But I just remember being in my heart, I was like, I just have to trust. And I don't even know what I'm trusting, but like, I just have to trust what I want. And it was scary because my parents were scared for me, and, they didn't know what I was doing. If you're a woman who makes money or wants to make more of it, but still feels overwhelmed, disconnected, or unsure how to actually lead your finances, I created Magical Women in Money just for you. MWMM is where money meets self-trust, strategy meets intuition, and women stop outsourcing their financial power. Inside, I teach you how to organize your finances, understand your faulty money habits, align your earning with your astrology, and build a real wealth for your future without shame, pressure, or feeling like you're behind. This is a personal finance meets astrology method that works. It's grounded, empowering money work for women that feels approachable and soulful. Join the waitlist for Magical Women in Money membership, MWMM. The link is in the show notes. So my 20s were very financially chaotic. So even though I could generate money and I got out of college and I was completely on my own financially. So my parents, when I was in school, they gave me like a very, very minimal amount of money. Like I still had a job. I had part-time jobs. I worked at a juice bar on Cahuenga. Like I worked a lot. I did my jewelry. I didn't just run my jewelry line. I had a part-time job so I could have a little bit of stability. And I also met a lot of people working at the juice bar and people that bought my jewelry or bought tarot readings from me or whatever. But really, I was always making just enough. I got totally, cut off after I graduated college. And I remember being in the car with my aunt after like a year of me, supporting myself. And my aunt goes, Natalia, your parents are blown away that you haven't asked them for money yet. And I remember having this moment in my head where I was like, yes, I was like, well, that's, I was like, I just trusted myself like immensely. And I think this is important because I think entrepreneurship and like generating money through your own means and skills, you definitely have to have like a self-trust and like definitely a tolerance for risk as well. So we'll talk about that. But I would just say, honestly, my 20s, even though I knew how to generate and I was supporting myself, they were still total financial chaos. Like I would have moments where it would be like the day before rent was going to be paid. And I would be like, how am I going to make money for rent tomorrow? And I would literally figure something out. Every so often, my friends would help me and then I'd pay them back. I had DJ gigs when I started DJing. I started doing social media on the side. I worked odd jobs. I worked at a bar on Crescent Heights. I worked at a shoe store. I worked at a jewelry store. I just, I always knew I wanted to do my own thing. So I just had like part-time work to supplement that. And all the while, I was very like I was very spiritual, and that just sort of unfolded over time. And by spiritual, I don't mean that in any kind of perfection way. Like I just mean like I just couldn't deal with the idea of only existing as like a mind and a body. So I was always seeking like, what is the relationship that I have to like the deeper part of myself or the universe or my creator? And I started to really get into like the spiritual side of money. Like, what are mantras that I can work with, or understanding my subconscious? Like these were things that unfolded for me over time. And I kind of stayed stuck there for a while because I just sort of liked feeling safe in like the spiritual, non-technical side of money. Because another thing, just alluding to my dad, my dad, he was very, very smart with numbers. So he was a CPA, which is like a certified public accountant. And he just was a numbers person. Even he's come through in mediumship sessions, and Susan Grau, who I've had on the show, she channeled my dad before his birthday, right after he had died. And she said, yeah, your dad is keeps saying that he's a numbers person. He's a numbers person. And that was so cool. I was like, oh my God, that is so my dad. Like he would literally say that all the time. He wrote a letter to me. One of the last letters he ever wrote to me, he said, I'm a numbers person. And I've always admired like how you could take risks, and you were just way more like risk tolerant than me and your mom. And yeah, maybe someday I'll read you, babes, that letter that he wrote me, because I'm so grateful I have it. It's one of the greatest things. Whenever I miss him, I read it to myself. It's so special to me. But with all of that being said, I feel like my 20s were just like this journey of just figuring out how to like support myself with what it is that I wanted to do, which was more of like the spirituality business. I did DJing for a while. I wanted to build myself as a touring artist. Like I always had this desire to like do things that were my own thing. But as I was doing that, I had to support myself, and I had to pay my rent, and I had to figure out how to eat. Like I had to do a lot of different stuff. So I really like maneuvered all of these different things, and I would get odd jobs. And, living in LA, that was easy to get. Like a friend would be like, hey, my best friend's having a bachelorette party. Can we pay you $300 to drive to the desert and read our tarot? And just like I used my skills, and then like people knew what I did because I shared it on, early Instagram and Facebook, and even before all of that, MySpace. So people just had like an awareness of what it is that I did. I DJ'd at a bar once a week. I made like $150 doing that. I basically did, but here's the thing, in my 20s, I did the bare minimum, and I had no organization. I mean, just like I did when I was 16, I generated and I spent. I generated and I spent. I generated and then I spent. And oftentimes what I would do is I would spend more than I made. And by the end of my 20s, getting into like 28, 29, I was working on 3rd Street in Los Angeles, and I was working for a jewelry line, and I just was getting exhausted. Like I was like, wow, I'm like almost 30 years old. I'm like working in this jewelry store. I'm making ends meet, and I'm just getting tired. But I had worked with the owner. I'd known him. He was a friend of mine. And I literally said like, can I do your social media? And he was like, yeah, you can do my social media. So I made a little more money doing that. And then I started running social media for other people that I knew. And I just started making a little more money on top of what it is that I was making at the jewelry store, and then what it is that I was making in my business. And basically by the end of my 20s, I made a decision. I was like, I'm so freaking tired. I was like, I'm exhausted. I'm broke. Like I spend money faster than I make it, or I just don't make enough to like sustain myself, to like pay my rent, eat food, pay the bills that I have to pay. And I started to sit down and read a book every Tuesday afternoon for 33 minutes called Secrets of a Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And that was one of the first money books that I ever read. It was actually given to me by one of my first mentors. He was a Virgo, and he mentored me a bit and helped me a bit with my jewelry line. Because one thing I will say over the years is that And I see this a lot with Gen Z and obviously millennials too, but definitely a lot with like the Gen Z content that I see is like a lot of like what I'm noticing culturally with Gen Z is that they just like go for it. Like they just start making stuff. And I feel like that is something that I have attributed to my ability to generate and cultivate success or get opportunities over the years or receive opportunities over the years is literally just because I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me what to do, how to do it, or if I was good enough. I just figured out ways to do things. And I think that showing this feels like a universal truth to me, but it's like just showing the universe and showing life and even showing other people and yourself that you're willing to go first and bet on yourself and take action is so freaking badass. And people see it. So it's like, it's almost like if you like go to someone and you're like, hey, I want you to pay me for this. I know I'm good at it, but I've never done it before. And they're like, well, wait, how am I supposed to put trust and like send and give you money and like flow this currency of energy towards you, which is money, if you haven't even like taken the first step and gone first? So I think that's very true with business. I think that's very true with like asking for opportunities. It's like when you step forward and you do things first, that's really powerful. So that money book from T. Harv Eker, that really transformed my thinking, and it got me thinking more about the technical sides of money. And essentially in my 20s, I had so many odd jobs. I had my business, but you can hear and see that like I did a lot of things to supplement that business. And then essentially I got to this place where I was like, I need more guidance and I need to make more money because I'm just so tired of this back and forth broke energy, like just barely making it, spending to zero, like, you know, making $1,000, spending $1,500. Like it was just like getting crazy. And I was just over it. And I knew in my heart that I needed to learn more. And so I started reading that book, and that started to get me thinking about like financial organization and thinking differently about money and my potential. And around that time, I also got an opportunity where someone that knew me, that I was friends with, decided to hire me onto her company to do social media. So, and they were like, we'll pay you this much. And I was like, oh my God, like $3,000 a month. That's like the most like steadily, like I just felt like I had won the lottery. I was like, oh my God, $3,000 a month. That is like the best thing ever. And so I started to do social media and work remotely for this small startup. And it was doing social media for things that like I had no idea about. So I had to like research a lot, and it was not easy, but I like over time figured it out. It ultimately didn't work out with that opportunity. But along those lines, I also had started to think about being a life coach. And I had I didn't even know what a life coach was. I was like, how do you get certified to do that? What even is that? But I literally heard it from my guides one day when I was studying my T. Harv Eker book. And I didn't even know what it meant, but I just decided, okay, I'm going to research how to do this. And I literally added it to my website. I was like, well, I've been life coaching, really reading people's charts for the last, I don't know, freaking 8 years or something. I was like, I could figure out how to like mentor people. And I literally made a page on my website, never promoted it, never even spoke about it. And I literally had my first client come by way of Google. She literally came to 2 sessions at my house, and then we had amazing sessions. And she's like, this was so great. I don't even need the other 2 sessions. Thank you. And then that was actually how I started to have like a life coaching business. And that was really kind of the birth of all of everything that I do now, amazingly enough. That was also the year that I started my podcast. That was 2018. That was also the year that I started doing morning practice, and like visualizing my life and taking my mornings more seriously. I used to wake up in the morning to go to my corporate job. I got a corporate job to create more stability after the startup thing didn't work out. And I would drive to Vernon. And in my drives to Vernon in the morning from West Hollywood, I would listen to like books on money, like Jen Sincero. I literally listened to books about being healthier with men and dating. And I listened to books about being healthier with money and like seeing my potential better. And I would drive to Vernon and I would sometimes it'd take an hour and a half in traffic both ways when it should have taken 25 minutes. But I had to drive during rush hour, both going there and coming home. And then on my off days or early in the morning, I worked on content. I recorded the podcast. Like, I just kept following like my internal guidance and like really, really listening to my heart. If you're standing at the edge of a major life, money, or business transition, and you know the next chapter requires a different level of support, this may be your moment to work with me one-to-one. There are 2 ways to do that. The first is my year-long total life transformation mentorship, a deeply supported journey where we work on your money, your vitality, and your visibility so the growth you create is embodied and sustainable. The second is my signature one-to-one money and business mentoring, focused strategic support to help you stabilize, grow, and lead your finances and business with clarity and confidence. Both are for women who value refinement and are ready to build a life and business with intention, time spaciousness, and depth. If you feel the call to work with me one-to-one, the application is waiting for you in the show notes. Now, that corporate job, that did not work out for me. I didn't get along with my boss at all. That was really where I recognized that like I had an amazing work ethic, but I definitely struggled with like difficult personalities. And I really, really struggled with this boss in particular. And so I talked to the head of the company and I said, I'm really, really struggling working for this person. Like, what do I do? And she thinking she'd support me and stand up for me. And I just needed to get to my 6-month raise and blah, blah, blah. She literally was on the phone with me and she goes, this person is a fact of life. And if you in this company, and if you don't like it and get along, then you probably need to find another place to work. I remember chills running down my spine because I was like, oh my God, like what? Like, no, I told myself I needed that job. I needed the $4,000 a month that I was making. You know, at that point I was paying my rent completely by myself. My rent was $1,500 a month. I was completely paying for my life. So $4,000, but after taxes, it was probably, you know, $3,600 or something like that. And basically I freaked out when she said that because I was like, oh my God, I need this job. But I also was doing a lot of visualization then. I was doing a lot of inner work on myself. And I had this semblance of confidence that was like, you know what? Maybe I can go full time with what it is that I'm doing. I had launched my first course a couple months before and I had actually done really well. It was called Mystic 101. If anyone remembers it, please DM me because I will literally just fall out of my chair because that's like OG NB. And I want to say that behind the scenes of these jobs and these things I was doing, I was always just following my heart with what to do next with the business. So I was like putting things out on social media. You know, I would do events. Like that ingenuity that my dad acknowledged me for, like that was always present. I wasn't waiting for people to like wait to see me. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to be a DJ. I'm going to figure out how to be a touring DJ. I'm going to figure out how to make money as a DJ. I DJ'd weddings. I DJ'd like odd, like weird events. Like I just was like, I'm going to just figure things out. And before I was doing like sexy, cool stuff, like I was doing things that like was just not that fun. Like, I mean, even like honestly, DJing weddings, like that sounds beautiful, but it is unbelievably stressful. Like that was not for me. I think I DJ'd literally 2 or 3 weddings and I was like, too much pressure. And just like, that was definitely just not a fit for me. But like, I just was willing to like put in the energy and the reps and the time and like figure out what I wanted. And I did a lot of stuff like where it's like nobody, and I said this in an earlier episode where I was like, nobody gave a shit. Like no one cared. Like, and that's okay because I cared and I had a vision for what it is that I wanted to create. And I was just willing to like go through the experiences and put in the reps to figure out how to do it. And most of all, what I was doing unbeknownst to me is I was building community with all of you. I was literally building relationships relationally with you by showing up with the astrology or showing up with the tarot or showing up with my meditations or making a mix for you or whatever. It's like, or just showing up like through all these different avenues and just doing it over time until things just really started to come together in 2018. I quit that corporate job. I went to that money seminar for the second time. I learned money management. I taught myself a new way of doing money management, which is the way that I teach it to you, babes. And I do it in MWMM. And it's what I talk about on this podcast and all of my long form content. And I literally just started to make leaps, but I showed myself and I showed God universe that I was willing to take care of what it was that I was being given. Because when I sat down and actually did my numbers with all the different things I was doing, I started recognizing that between my corporate job and my astrology writing and all the different things that I was getting paid for, I was actually making decent money. I was making $5,000 a month, some months $6,000 a month, but I was spending every single penny. And so it was after I went to that seminar for the second time that I was like, okay, I'm going to stop just being in all the spiritual woo-woo manifestation stuffy stuffs. And I'm going to start to actually take care of my finances. I'm going to take care of money. I'm going to show money that I care. I'm going to give it a place to rest in my life. And I opened 5 bank accounts and I started to actually manage my finances. And I started to when I would bring money in, I'd be like, okay, well, all of these need to have $100 minimum. So I'm going to generate and make sure that I can fill these accounts. And when I first opened the accounts and they were like, you need to fund $500 into these accounts by tomorrow, or we're going to close the accounts. And so I literally got on my email list. I ran a sale for my readings and I made my first $5,000 in literally less than 48 hours. I funded those accounts and I never, ever looked back. I then ran my next group program, which was called Mystic. I think it was called Mystic Apprenticeship or something. And I had 10 women join. They each paid $1,000. I worked with them for about 3 to 4 months and I made my first $10,000. And then I had a business coach that I got from the money seminar because I committed to the year to do the money seminar work. And the only reason I did it is because I knew I was going to get a coach. And that coach, her name was Pat. God bless her. I have no idea where Pat is now. But I remember Pat was like, okay, so what are you going to do next? And that single question is literally how I started a business. It wasn't just like, oh, what am I doing just to make ends meet right now? It was like, okay, how are you going to support your community next? What are you going to launch in your business next? And that was how it all started for me. And then over the years, this was also in a time where I was just really, really into digital course creation, and it was something I enjoyed and it was something I was pretty good at. And all the while I was recording episodes for the podcast and I was finding ways to utilize social media. And I have to say, my loves, at the basis of all of this, it was just listening to my heart and then figuring out the technical tools. When I mentor my women, whether I'm mentoring them in my high-level coaching or I am mentoring them in a weekly Q&A with my angels in MWMM, I always ask them, what do you want to be doing? What do you want? Because that is something I always had to ask myself is what do I want? And then what am I willing to do what footwork am I willing to do to create it? So it's really special to share this. And I really hope that this was helpful, especially if maybe you find yourself in a process in some area of your life where you're just kind of in the unsexy, boring part and you love it, but you need a little motivation to keep going. I really hope that just lifting up the hood a little bit and sharing my story, which I haven't done in quite a while, that it helps you just have this awareness and understanding of really sticking to the vision and then showing up for the process, even when it seems like no one cares but you. Because if you keep caring, it will only be a matter of time until other people care too, because you're contributing to them in some capacity and they appreciate it. And that's, to me, what it's been about all these years with all of you angels. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you loved this episode, and I would love to hear from you in my DMs just how this landed for you. You can DM me at Natalia_Benson. I love you so much. I will see you soon. Bye.